So then let's move forward. Let's get started. I'd like to introduce you to our speakers today. We do have guests from Own Backup, and we have Jairi and Matthew. I hope I pronounced your names correctly. Would you guys like to unmute yourselves and introduce yourselves before we get started?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you again for having us today. We're really excited to be here and be presenting on behalf of Own Backup. Just a quick introduction. My name is Matt. I am a senior account executive with Own Backup. I've been with Own Backup for about 2 years, but a lot of experience in the ecosystem as an end user mostly, giving you all the headaches that I'm sure you're getting from time to time. And fun fact about me is I actually am a new resident in DC. So if you see me out and about, feel free to say hello, and hopefully some in-person events start to happen more often so that we can meet up in person. But Jerry, you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, nice to meet you guys in the DC user group. My name is Jerry Reed. I'm a solutions engineer here at Own Backup. I've actually been with the company since January for about 9 months. Previously, I was a lead Salesforce admin for a large manufacturing company, so I also have about 4 years in the Salesforce ecosystem. I have 4 certifications myself, so I understand. I heard the struggles earlier. The struggle is real, so yeah. But keep going. Don't let that deter you. So, do that. I'm actually coming from Los Angeles, California, speaking with you this morning, so it's early over here. And I'm originally from South Carolina and a proud Clemson alum. So thank you, Margaret, for taunting me with your little Georgia scarf there. Appreciate it. Yeah. That's the first thing I noticed. Thanks.
Thanks, Jerry. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to stop sharing so you guys can have the screen. I think you also had some fun stuff to share with the group as well today.
Yes, absolutely. So Jerry, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, we can jump right in. I'm going to...
Yeah, should be seeing that.
Awesome. Yeah, I can see it now. Again, today we're going to be presenting just on behalf of Own Backup, but really focusing on the 7 steps that it takes to recover from data loss using the Salesforce Weekly Export. It is a native solution that we've seen a lot of our customers using before they come to Own Backup. So I think it would be really helpful to highlight that. And those of you who aren't familiar with Own Backup, really quick highlight is that we are Salesforce's Summit partner for backup and recovery. And you can find us on the App Exchange, and we work pretty closely with Salesforce. So I've been in the ecosystem for a while. And if we move on, Jerry, we can skip probably 2 slides ahead because we did the intros already. But what we wanted to share is that we're actually going to be doing a raffle for an eStore gift card for some Salesforce swag. We heard that is one of the hot items that is loved in these meetings. So and with the in-person events not happening too often anymore, it's a little bit hard to get the Salesforce swag. So we're looking to raffle off two winners. I'm going to put a link in the chat window where that you can basically sign up so that you can be entered into the raffle. That should be there. If not, please let me know. And if it doesn't work for any reason, also definitely let us know. So once you sign up there, at the end of the session, we'll do the raffle, and hopefully 2 winners will win eStore gift cards. I just want to confirm that works actually before I move on.
Did everyone see that in the chat? Can you guys see that?
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Afe. That is great. So we can move on. And before we dive straight in, I just want to let you all know that we appreciate this being an interactive session. So if you want to jump in with questions while we're going through this, please, we'll welcome that. Feel free. You can also use the chat window or we'll do a short Q&A at the end as well. So if you don't want to jump in, that's fine, but would love for this to be interactive. But so with covering the 7 steps it takes to recover from data loss using the weekly export, we first want to just highlight the top causes of data loss and corruption because it does happen pretty often and in many different ways. And I'm sure everyone here probably has their own unique experiences with data loss or corruption in the org. And by far, the number one occurrence we see is human error. So whether it's someone like me, mistakenly deleting something or overwriting data, or just a simple data loader mistake, it can happen in a ton of different ways. And these are just here to highlight that it does happen, and we see at Own Backup, even with our customers, we help them through data loss and corruption restores on average 250 times a month. 250 times a month. So we're seeing it even when you are protected. It's something that happens and is pretty uncontrollable in terms of stopping. So we want to highlight here what your options are. So Jared, if we move on to the next slide, this will show you what you have as native options with Salesforce at the current moment. So on the left, you'll see the weekly export, which is what we're going to focus most of our time discussing today. But there are a lot of risks and concerns with this strategy. One, first and foremost, it's only one backup per week, and it's not a full, complete set of your data. There's no metadata included in it. And when you rely on one backup per week, you're potentially putting yourself at risk for losing a week's worth of data. So that obviously, I'm sure everyone uses Salesforce here for a different reason. It's not an out-of-the-box solution by any means, but more often than not, it's a business critical system. So that data is pretty important. So that's definitely a risk to consider, as well as the recovery process is what we're going to walk you through today. It's very time consuming and tedious. Next, you have the API and do-it-yourself kind of export to a data warehouse, which is not something we see that often, to be quite honest. It's very challenging and expensive to build and maintain. You also have your sandboxes, but we pretty much consider this not a backup and recovery solution because it only refreshes every 30 days and you don't have any historical backups, which makes it very difficult when you're talking about data loss and corruption and restoring from that. And then lastly, last resort data recovery service is something Salesforce has offered for a long time. They retired it, then they brought it back. But essentially, it is not a great solution to rely on, specifically because there's a $10,000 fee involved if you want these exports provided to you, which are essentially just your weekly exports CSV files. And there's SLA on this is about 6 to 8 weeks. And then you have to go through the process we're going to show you. So just wanted to highlight the options here that Salesforce provides at the time. And then moving on, we will dive into the weekly export and how you can recover from that. So Jerry, if we want to go, this is basically very high level of the 7 steps that it takes to restore. We're going to dive into each step a little bit, but not too much into the nitty gritty because we would be here for hours if we were actually walking through all the steps and details that you have to go through. So we're going to cover it at a high level, and Jerry is going to help me because Jerry, like you said, he has experience as a Salesforce admin and has done this a few times, right, Jerry? How many times did you tell me the other day that you've done
this? I don't even know, like 322 or something like that.
It's oddly specific, but I'm sure you're gonna be able to help us and kind of give some tips and tricks as we go along the way. So if anyone wants to screenshot this as a high-level overview, we'll also walk through step by step, but this is definitely important. We also have an ebook on the 7-step process that goes into a lot more granular details on it that you can find on the OwnBackup website. But step number 1, if Jerry, if you want to proceed on to the next slide, is that we're going to size the damage. And really what we mean by this is you're going to have to understand what happened and what the effects of the data loss were. As we all know, Salesforce is a very relational database. So if you delete one account, that's not the only thing getting deleted. There's going to be a cascade delete effect. So really the first step is understanding what happened in your data loss or corruption scenario. And to do this, you're really going to have a good understanding of your schema. So Jerry, with your experience, do you want to add any tips or tricks or different ways you can go about understanding the org schema?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I used was Workbench, and hopefully you guys are familiar with Workbench, the online tool. So, in Workbench, it has a view where when you log in, it'll pull up your schema, so to give you all of your objects and everything like that. So that's a great tool. And then in Salesforce as well, there's that place where you can go and view your schema, the schema builder or whatever as well. But yeah, that's definitely the first step is to figure out, what your schema looks like. So you don't want to, make sure if you have a data loss, if you have like accounts or something, you want to make sure you don't lose like those cases or contacts opportunities that are related. So yeah, that's a very important first step.
Definitely. And you got a comment in the chat, Jerry. Eric said roughly 322 and a scar for each one. And from what you told me.
Exactly. For sure. For sure.
Definitely. Awesome. And again, just a reminder, if anyone wants to ask questions about the steps as we go through, we got our first question. Will we get the deck from this presentation? Yeah, I believe we can definitely provide this, and it should be helpful should you ever have to go through this. But I think afterwards, we're all going to hope for the same thing, that you don't have to ever. So moving on to step 2 is you're going to want to isolate the missing data. So this is kind of like basically standing in a crowded auditorium or a room and trying to figure out who's not there, which is very difficult and challenging. And it's not like we can really stand in a crowded room anymore anyway. So just a good way to kind of visualize what that would be like. But what we really mean by isolating missing data is that you're going to want to get basically 2 sets of data, one data set before the data loss and then one set after. So you're going to then extract the relevant tables from each data set, open it up into 2 different Excel files, Then you're going to sort and then compare to identify any of the missing parent data. So from there, you're then going to have to find these related records and then create a restore file for each and every object. So there's a lot there, Jerry. I don't know if you can simplify that or put it into better words. You'll see some 4 steps here to go about that process, but essentially the 2 data sets before and after, and then extracting the relevant tables, putting into Excel files, and then you're gonna have to do that for each object. So I don't know if you can add anything else there.
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of, in this step, you kind of have to be like an Excel master, right? So you have to take those 2 files and kind of compare and see where the actual data loss is. So, using stuff like VLOOKUPs to be able to tell, okay, between these 2 sheets, this data is missing from this one data set that's not in the other data set. So just like Matt said, trying to figure out, looking in the crowd and figuring out who's not there. So very, tedious step here, but yeah, you definitely need some Excel skills for this one.
Yeah, definitely going to, hopefully you don't experience too big of a data loss too, but could be a lot of files that you have to set up for each and every object. So I think with that, we can move on. Doesn't look like any questions there. So we'll go to step 3. And this is where you're going to start to create the restore files, and the fun starts to begin here. So moving on to that next slide. Thanks, Jerry. Appreciate it. So what we're going to do here to create the restore files is once you've isolated those missing records, you're going to start and to create these restore files, like I said, for each and every object, solely containing the missing records of that object. So one of the steps is you're going to have to identify the missing children and then add these records to a future restore file, again, for each and every object. So knowing the schema here is definitely going to be important to help speed this process up. That's something that can really delay this. If you don't do it properly and catch all of the relevant objects, the risk here is you're going to end up with a number of missing objects and missing records. And what I've heard from working with a few customers who have gone through this process prior to needing a backup and recovery solution is that they always get an incomplete set when they're doing the restore. They always tell me, we restored, it took a while, but we didn't get everything, this is obviously a really key piece in that. And Jerry, I don't know if you want to jump back in here and add any context.
No, I think you covered it. Just there, just have to make sure, when you load these into data loader, and we'll talk about that in a few steps. So you're going to need 1 file per object that's like a CSV file. So this is the initial process to doing that.
Perfect. Then we can jump on to step 4, which is where we're going to create the custom external ID fields. So you're probably thinking at this point, this is a nightmare. And if you've had experience creating custom external ID fields, it's another tedious step. But we want to make sure we walk through every step, as granular as we can with the time presented. So moving on to that next slide, you'll see 10 steps to go about. This might be a good slide to screenshot. But if anyone is familiar with external IDs, you probably are familiar with this. And Jerry, you have, I know, a lot of experience here. So I'm going to kick it over to you to give us a high-level overview of this piece right here.
Yeah, so what you're going to do is you're creating a field, an external ID field on your accounts object. And so what that's going to do is store your current ID for that object record. So, what happens is when you're going to restore these files from a Salesforce perspective, you get new Salesforce IDs. So you need to be able to capture the existing Salesforce ID, because when you restore those child records, you will have no reference to that new ID for the accounts, right? Once you load them again. So you'll need some reference back to that old ID. So what you can do is store that old ID in this field here. And then as you'll see in a step further down, we'll actually reference this field in those child object records when we load those, so that they'll have that tied back to the parent account.
Awesome. Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate that. With that, yeah.
Another question in the chat is they're just asking if this presentation can be shared at the end or.
Yep. Yeah, I'm pretty positive it can. And I think that will be helpful. There's also our ebook online, which we can definitely share with you afterwards. I'll get my hands on that. And you, Pallavi, you can disperse that. So those 2 resources will be pretty helpful, I think, should you ever have to go through this.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Awesome. So next we are going to do step 5. So once that's done and you created those external ID fields, it's time to start preparing the deleted record files to get ready to actually do the recovery efforts. So this is where we actually start to, get ready to push the data back into Salesforce. So here we're going to update column headers. This is an important step for each and every restore file, whether it's opportunities, contacts, cases, all the way down the chain. In these related files, instead of the ID field, you're going to want to rename it to the account ID field. And remember, saving every single CSV that you have is required by the Salesforce data import tool. So here you're going to prepare those files to be inserted and then upserted, and we'll walk into that step-by-step process next here when we're actually talking about importing these files. Probably not a lot to add here, Jerry, in this step, but I'm going to give you the chance to if you want to.
Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah, you got it.
Cool. So step 6, this is where it gets a little tricky and the fun begins. Definitely, there's going to be a lot to cover here. We'll do it at a high level, and if there are questions, let us know. But this step focuses on ensuring the files are restored in proper order using Data Loader. So you'll want to start with inserts, and then we're going to upsert the children accounts. It's very important here. The parent objects need to be established first in order to generate the new ID value. Then you can add the children so that you can actually rebuild those correct relationships to each and every parent. So you'll see here kind of gives you a little bit of a visual of what it looks like, but you really got to pay very close attention to the order in which the files are processed. And understanding your schema here is going to be very, very important. That's pretty much a theme throughout. So you can determine the order based on the understanding of the schema, like I just said, and then confirm which objects are dependent on others. For example, starting with accounts, that will be an insert as the parent. And then that's pretty straightforward. From there, you want to upsert the children that are related to the account object. So that's that first step. Jerry, anything you want to add here in there? I think that was pretty clear.
No, yeah, you got it.
Great. From there, next up, you're going to start to insert the accounts using Salesforce Apex Data Loader. Starting off with accounts, like I said, is the insert. Then we'll select the first object, which is the account object, choose a CSV file with the account records that are to be processed, click next to continue. That leads us to the next slide, Jerry, where we're going to map the existing fields. And then, just a moment, you're going to want to definitely save the map for future use. And then after that's done, review, see what went well. Hopefully it all went well, so you don't have to make any corrections, but if there are errors, they'll present itself at that point. And then once that's done, you pretty much started the initial inserts, and then that's when we're going to go to the children. And then moving on with the children, again, the biggest thing to consider here is that instead of the insert, it's going to be an upsert. That's going to be very important. And following the same directions, you're going to go through, select a matching external field, choose your related objects, and then go on from there until the process is completed. Another additional consideration or option that you have for the upsert is that instead of mapping based on the account ID field, or the account ID field in the record, you can map using a different field. And we suggest you use the new custom field to match the child records to the parent. It's a little bit easier. So basically just taking a look at the screen, what it looks like in Data Loader flow. Step 2A on the left, you'll choose the match to your contacts, what to match your contacts to. That's the old account ID. And then in step 2B on the right, you're going to choose a related object. And again, we're going to match to our old ID field. That's a mouthful and definitely a lot there. Jerry, I don't know if you want to simplify that at all for me in your experience.
No, just a couple things in your mind. Yeah, you have to do you have to do the upsert, right? Because you have to tie it to this field that represents the old Salesforce ID. So that's literally like your only link to that parent account record. So that's very important that that's done. And then, just to keep in mind also, this has to be done for every child object. So every child object needs to make sure you have that field included, and you're doing the upsert and tying it back to the account using that field. Also, real quick, thanks. And I know I'm going to pronounce this name wrong, but Chatoyer is a happy OwnBackup customer, which is great. And so they've actually put a link in the chat to the ebook that we have for the steps to do the restore. So thank you for that. We will try to disseminate this out, but that is there for you in the chat if you want to get that right now. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that is awesome. Thank you so much. That is, it looks like you can probably do my job better than I can. You have that up and ready. That is awesome, and glad that you are a happy OwnBackup customer as well. That pretty much does it for step 6, I think.
And then Matt, we got one more great question from Tree, I think it is. From my understanding, insert and upsert these records are from the result of the VLOOKUP from the before and after deletion step, correct? And that is completely correct. So from that VLOOKUP, you determine the records that have been, lost that need to be reinserted. So you generate your new load files from that VLOOKUP from those records that you found that have been lost. And then those files, you come in and do the insert for the account records. And then you do the upsert for the child account object records using this reference field here. And then you will, that'll be the processor restart. So yes, that's completely correct.
Awesome. Great question.
All right.
So final step, and which we consider a step because it is very important, although it may not be actually doing anything, but it's additional considerations that you need to consider, because if you don't, this long drawn out process could take even longer, which we always want to avoid. I'm sure we can all say the same there, but some of the additional considerations you'll see here, pretty self-explanatory with the records with multiple parents, polymorphic fields, attachments, intra-object relationships are all things that could make this process even harder than it already is. So, these are pretty straightforward. If there are any questions here, we're happy to answer on how this changes anything. Going step by step through everything probably would take a little long, but definitely some additional considerations. We have a bunch of customer stories on our website of companies who have actually gone through this process with very valuable data that they've lost. One of them being Multnomah County, which is the one we like to share very often because they let us share it, and not every company wants to talk about data loss that they've had, which is, we're grateful for them. But long story short, they went through this exact process, and it took them over 5 weeks to complete to get everything back. It was a pretty major data loss for them, and this was not the right strategy for them. And luckily, they found own backup. So before we dive into easier options, which specifically are going to be about own backup and how we make this process, go from very drawn out, days to weeks to a matter of clicks, minutes to hours, we want to stop for Q&A. So any additional questions? And it looks like we just got one more.
Yeah, we got one in the chat. Yeah.
Great.
So does Apex data loader need to be used? So no, Ape, you can use any, IDE tool. So you can actually use Workbench to do this. If you're experienced with Workbench, you can use data loader. You can use any Visual Studio, any type tool like that you're used to putting in data that can be used.
Awesome.
Any other questions? You guys can just spit, you don't have to put in the chat. You can unmute and spit them out as well. That's fine.
Okay, so I've got questions. Funny enough, we're about to start using our own backup in my company, and we're going to have some training. But I was hoping, I've been looking for materials online, like videos and stuff in order to learn before the actual training sessions, and I haven't come across a lot. So is there somewhere we need to go to get like training materials, like except from like documentation? Because I saw the blog and it's a lot of write-up, but there are not a lot of training videos and stuff that could help. So.
And this is for, you're an existing own backup customer. Is that for own backup or what?
No, we not yet. Basically, we're about to get that set up. So, yeah.
Yeah. So once you become an own backup customer, you'll get we have what's called onboarding. So you'll get with someone in our customer success team. They'll set you up for the first time, and then they'll provide training at that time.
Yeah, we in terms of own backup, we also have a ton of resources in terms of video demonstrations, short video demonstrations, available actually on our YouTube channel, as well as the website. If Afe, if you're asking about video training for the 7 steps to recover from data loss, that would be from Salesforce themselves, and they do not, from my understanding, provide a lot of material on this. This actually training was done on behalf of own backup. The reason being is we come from a standpoint of, we know how important the data in your Salesforce orgs are, and without a proper backup and recovery solution, it can be very challenging, and we still want to provide help whether you're an own backup customer or not. We are very involved in the space and a trusted partner from Salesforce, so we provide all this, but we do not provide actual video training on the 7-step process, because we always love to position that that's what own backup's for. We can make that process a lot easier for you. But I think that segues nice, unless there's other questions to be asked, into what Own Backup looks like. And we'll do a short demonstration here of that exact scenario and the complete difference you'll see from a restore process with Own Backup as opposed to doing it manually with the export.
All right, so we'll do a little quick demo here. So this is Own Backup. So a couple of things here. First thing you will notice, see a message recording the demo. Fortunately, I don't think we are recording. Well, Pallavi, is that something you can set up?
We have not been recording. I can start recording if we want to do the Own Backup piece as the recording.
Oh, somebody's been recording. Okay, so someone has been recording. That's great. All right, so this is the Own Backup application. Actually, the first thing I want to point you to up top is the URL. So we're actually located outside of Salesforce. So we think that is of paramount importance here at Own Backup. You don't want to have your backups located inside Salesforce, right? That's kind of like having your spare car keys in your car. And so when you lock your car, you're not able to get to your spare car keys. Same thing with Salesforce, very reliable application. But if it happens to go down, you still want to be able to access your backups. So our infrastructure is located outside of Salesforce, so you can rest assured that you'll always be able to access your backups. This first screen here, this kind of homepage, is called our multi-org dashboard. So you can see here, not only do we back up your production data, but we can also back up all your Sandbox data as well. So here you can see in my demo org here, I have my full Sandbox, I have a partial copy, and I have multiple dev Sandboxes as well. So Own Backup offers you unlimited storage. So for each one of these orgs that you add to the environment, you can add as much storage as you need, and that's from a data and metadata standpoint. Also, you have an unlimited number of orgs that you can add as well. So if you come here and as your business grows and you need to add, multiple dev sandboxes, you're creating other projects, we can actually grow and scale with you. All right. So I want to go through a data loss scenario here. It's like similar to the 7 steps and kind of show you how much easier it is to do with Own Backup. So here I'm going to go into my production data environment. And then here below, I have this cool visual graph. So this visual graph answers the question of when did a data loss occur and what the magnitude of that data loss is, right? So, let's say, you have a user coming up to you and they say, hey, I'm looking for my accounts. My accounts are gone. They're no longer in my Salesforce org. I need to get those restored. So the first thing, as opposed to, trying to create those files and, doing those VLOOKUPs, is we can tell right here from the graph. So here I'm going to look at accounts. This works for any standard or custom object in your environment. You can run this graph on any of those, and we can look at any time frame. So here we can go and pull up and see what happened in your org over the last week, last month or two. You can even set a custom range here. Maybe you want to see what happened year to date, or even all of your backups. So we can go here and show you the data from all of your backups for this account object. And we can show you every time accounts were added, that's here in the green. Every time accounts were changed, that's here in the gray. And then every time accounts were removed, that's shown here in the red. Now we're looking for this data loss. This user just came up to you. They're looking for this latest data that they can't find in their Salesforce org. So we'll just go back here 7 days and we'll kind of just focus on what was removed. And so we can see here, a couple of days ago on October the 6th, we had 84 accounts that were deleted. So again, using this visual graph, I'm able to tell you, hey, the last data loss occurred 3 days ago, and the number of accounts that were affected, 84 accounts. Now, to do some more detailed analysis on that, I can click on that red dot, and then that's going to take me into actually a full backup for that date. And so here, not only can I see these 84 records that were deleted, but I can see any other objects that had records deleted as well. And so as you can see here, I actually have some custom objects here, account L1, account L2, account L3, that also have some records here that were deleted. So maybe I've had some sort of cascade delete effect, right? So this points to those, identifying those child object records. So, I do have some child object records that have some records that are deleted. Maybe they're related, maybe not. I'll be able to show that to you in a second. But you can easily see all the objects here and all the effects. So even though I drill down on accounts, in this screen here, in this backup, I can show you the full effect of every object in my org. All right. And so now that I want to determine, I want to restore these 84 accounts, I'm going to hit this restore button. And then that's going to start the process of restoring these accounts back into my org. But before we actually put the data back in your org, we're going to kind of give you a preview. And so we're going to show you those accounts that were deleted, but we're also, to simplify these 7 steps, we're also going to go through your schema for you without you having to do that manually. And we're going to identify all those relationships. And if any of those child object or related records were deleted, we'll be able to present that to you as well. So when that job runs, it looks like this. And so we can see here that not only do we have these 84 accounts that were deleted and need to be restored, but we have a bunch of other records and a bunch of other objects, right, that need to be restored as well that are related to the accounts. And here we can actually see those relationships. So here, that custom object that I had, that account level 1, I can see that's a child to the account. If I expand that here, I can see that we had that level 2 object, but it's actually a child to the level 1 and a grandchild to the account. So we keep that relationship intact. We can tell you what's the parent, what's the child. And then we also can go 5 levels deep with these child relationships. So, as complicated as your schema can get, OwnBackup can go and figure out what that relationship is by going through your schema and then present that data for you if it was deleted. So you'll be able to restore that along with the accounts. And then here, as you can see, we also grab these other records. So cases that are related to the accounts, contacts, opportunities, basically every object here that has that master detail relationship, right, with the account. We have identified that, and then we have it here for you to be able to restore back. Now, what you'll also notice is this orphan in parentheses. So this object doesn't have a master detail relationship with the account, but it has a lookup relationship. So if you think about those lookups, this object records are not deleted from your Salesforce org. They just have no link now to that parent object, right, to that parent account or parent opportunity or whatever. So once we restore those object records, we'll restore those lookup relationships as well. So those records are no longer orphaned. We also can, pull these other stuff. So when we talk about additional considerations, we can pull your chatter feeds and we can pull those attachments or content documents that are like in Lightning. And so we also can pull those content document links as well. So when a record is deleted, that was tied to a content document. So when we restore that record, we'll also restore that link to a content document if that exists as well. All right. So basically, we kind of take these 7 steps. We kind of do all this for you in one step. You don't have to worry about doing a VLOOKUP to identify the related records that have been deleted. You don't have to worry about what relationships they are. We put all that together for you. We present that all in that one screen. We kind of done all that heavy lifting for you. Now we take an additional step here and we also let you customize this list. So, you have this full list and you can restore that, but maybe you want to customize this a little bit. So maybe you don't want to restore case records. You want to restore this whole data set, but you don't necessarily need the case data. All you have to do is deselect this. And so that case object data and all that related records will not be restored in this data set. So you have that flexibility. Also, you can actually go in and filter on these object records as well. So in this account object, I can click on this filter icon. And then I can take a CSV file of those 84 accounts and I can modify that. So, say you work with that user, you can show them this file and say, hey, here are the 84 accounts that we had that were deleted along with the associated data. And they can say, no, some of these accounts can remain deleted. Well, you can modify the CSV file, take those records out of that file and then upload a new version here. And then dynamically, we'll just use that data set when we do the restore. And then you also can use SQL where clauses as well. So if there, for some reason, you had some sort of criteria that you want to filter in the accounts that you wanted to restore, say you want to bring back your customer account types, you can do that here as well. All right. And then once that's done, once you have your set data set here that you want to use, that you want to restore back in your environment, you can just click the Start Restore button at the bottom. And now we'll take that data set and however you worked it and however you decided, from a granular level that you want to restore. And then we'll actually restore that back into your Salesforce org. So that's the OwnBackup process of restoring from a data loss. Kind of just recap, we went to that visual graph, able to determine when that data loss occurred, kind of the magnitude of that from the account perspective. Then we drill down, we're able to view, effects on other objects because those accounts were deleted. Then we click that restore button and then we're able to come here and do a granular restore and determine exactly what we want to restore back into your org and then kick off that with a Start Restore button. So that's the process. Any questions on the OwnBackup process or even the 7 steps as well? All right, I see we have one question. How far back is the restore old data set we can get? So we actually back up your data automatically every day. So you can, basically we do a backup. So, when Matt mentioned before, you have that 7 days, with the weekly export. So you are able to get those backups every day. In terms of retention, we retain those daily backups for 10 years. And then after 10 years, we have a weekly, monthly, and yearly backup that we do as well. And then you'll be able to retain, to refer to those basically into perpetuity, technically 99 years, which is, to me, considered perpetuity. So 10 years, you do your daily backups. And then further than that, you can pull up a backup every week or every month or every year if you need to. Great question. All right. Any other questions?
Jerry, for a higher fee, you can do backups even more frequently, correct? So every
Yes.
hour or whatever. So that is a feature, but it's at a higher price, correct?
Yes, very good point. Totally correct. Yeah. So we have for an additional fee, we have a feature called high frequency backups. And so the way that works is you select, some objects that are maybe more important to you that you need to be, backed up on a more frequent basis. And like you said, exactly, we can get down to the hour. We could do 12 hours, 6 hours, but we can get down to the hour. And yes, basically you pick those objects and we can do that more high frequency backup for you. Yep.
Thank you.
You got it, George. Yep. Perfect. All right, great. Any other questions?
Not a
Do you guys
question.
do magic on your spare time? Because this is kind of like magic, right? What you're doing. I love how you show it's only 84 accounts. Well, no, look at all those related objects. And if you miss any one of those, the cascading effect. So thank you so much.
Right. No, our product team has spent a lot of time, being intimately familiar with, with all the APIs, being able to, figure out and go through the schema and, being able to detect all that and then being able to present it and keep those relationships intact and the IDs as well. Right. So, we had that conversation about the IDs. You don't have to keep track of that here. You don't have to keep track of what the old ID was and what the new ID will be. We kind of keep track of that for you as well. All right. Thanks, George. Someone else had a comment, I think.
Yeah. Hey, Jerry, it's Pallavi. Any tips and tricks that you guys want to share further with the team about just backups in general? Or lessons learned that you've seen where maybe a customer came to you too late and how to prevent that for others?
Is that, using own backup, it greatly decreases that. So, do you mean like without own backup, like what a good way to do that is?
And so first part is just any tips and tricks that you haven't shared yet that the group might benefit from just for backup tips in general.
Yeah, I just doing that, making sure you capture your weekly exports. So that's probably more likely the more likely method you're going to use to back up your data. So with those weekly exports, you do get they're available once a week. And I think you have like a 48-hour window. So, you need to make sure you grab those. So if you don't grab that backup for that week within that 2-day period, that backup is gone. So, now you're talking about 2 weeks without having, between backups as opposed to 1 week. So I think that's one good tip is make sure, if you're still using a weekly export, make sure you go in there and grab it, on that Sunday or whatever day it, Salesforce, allows you to download it.
Well, maybe another way of looking at it would be, do you have any horror stories of companies that came to you because they lost that and they said, never again, that admin who was on leave for 2 weeks. And so now nobody was doing the backup. And of course, that's when things go wrong, right? So now you have 3 weeks with no backups because something went down.
Right.
So do you have any, without naming names, of course, but do you have any horror stories of customers who've come to you and said, this is what happened and we don't want it to happen again. And we're going to make the investment in backup. Anything that you can share? Because that'll get to the tips and tricks of, right?
Yeah, Matt, you have a good story around actually we had the company that did they deleted some data on purpose, but they still had some errors. You want to share that story?
Yeah, definitely. And what I'm doing now too is I want to get we have a ton of customer stories, luckily, that we're able to share. So I want to get the page where you can kind of go to and search by industry, by, company size, kind of whatever fits your needs. So I put that in the chat. But yeah, we had one company who was basically on purpose cleaning up data in their Salesforce org, which I think is pretty common for a lot of companies. And they were deleting without really understanding the step one, right? Size of damage and knowing the schema and what's going to be deleted in just deleting 100 accounts if it was, but they actually deleted, I think thousands of accounts that were just from a very old legacy, data set that they wanted to get rid of. And a lot got pulled into it. And from there, they had no backup solution. And they actually, and this seems teed up in too good of a way for what we're presenting, but they actually used that 6-step recovery ebook that we had. We've had that out for a while. They used that to go through the restore process on their own with the weekly export. It took them a tremendous amount of time, and they had to completely rebuild all of their metadata that was affected because there's no metadata backup at all. I believe they were only doing the weekly export as well. I think it wasn't a strict process. Like they weren't going through every week and making sure, okay, I'm getting these CSV files, every Sunday, like Jerry said. I think they were doing it probably once a month. So they lost a tremendous amount of data. I think the number they told us in terms of what they were able to recover was about 80%, maybe a little bit over that. So, still losing 20% of the data that was not supposed to be deleted is, it can affect, a lot of companies in different ways, depending on how you're leveraging Salesforce. They were using it in a very similar way to how Own Backup uses it: sales, service, operations, and specifically the data they were getting rid of was sales, and they had contracts in there, renewal opportunities, things that were pretty valuable to them. So even like for us, for example, sales team gets paid commissions based on our reports and our dashboards, which is on the metadata side. With the weekly export, if one of those reports was messed up, you don't have a backup to then recover or identify, what might have gone wrong. You have to do that completely manually, and that can affect obviously a whole bunch of things for the business. So that's essentially what happened with this customer, and they did come to Own Backup after that. And, I see just from being on the account executive side of things, I see it's a mix. It's either someone comes proactively, and just in transparency say, I see this as an insurance policy essentially, or they come reactively, which is then the conversation of, I get asked all the time, can you help us with this data loss we just had? And unfortunately, we can't unless you're an Own Backup customer. So those are the two types of scenarios we see. And I think Jerry's tips and tricks there are super on point. From what I've seen, I would say if you're not interested in, at least evaluating backup and recovery options, definitely make sure you're at least doing the weekly export, because that's actually a lot more than most companies in the Salesforce ecosystem seem to be doing. So I would not rely on the sandboxes as a backup strategy. I hear that from time to time. It's really not a good strategy because there's no historical backups. You're relying on just that one sandbox that you have that's not updating frequently. And then, I've also hear quite often, just from the Salesforce admin's perspective, that, we run a very tight ship. We don't allow deletions in our org. I'm on top of everything, which certainly may be the case. There's no doubt about that. But I would say more often than not, Jerry, you can correct me if I'm wrong, data corruption is what we see way more than we see data loss. Data loss certainly does happen, but corruption is something that happens, it feels like, every single day in Salesforce environments. And what we mean by that is just simply overwriting data incorrectly, which can be just as impactful as a data loss.
Yeah, what we normally see is someone's doing like some kind of mass update, right? Or they're doing some kind of mass upload, and they, either forgot a field or they actually had a value in there and they're overwriting this field and they didn't mean to do it. And so now you got, maybe you have a bunch of contact records and they all had like the, phone number change. So stuff like that happens. We see that on a daily basis.
It seems like it's almost inevitable that something will go wrong with all the data transfers that are going to happen in an org. And you should be cleaning your org. I mean, that's the whole point. You should be deleting things that if you don't, now you're going to have too much in storage, and that creates its own problem. So the solution is not never hit the delete button. So it's an interesting issue that I would have thought coming in when I first came in that Salesforce would have this under control. I can see 5 years from now, Salesforce buys Own Backup, and, with the way they do mergers and acquisitions, and let's buy Slack, and, let's buy Twitter. Okay, well, we couldn't get that one. And, the way they build out with their different clouds, velocity, et cetera. But you guys address a very important pain point for customers. Backup that Salesforce offers is not timely enough and robust enough, full stop.
For sure. And yep, we do get asked that. We get asked that a lot, is if Salesforce is going to buy us. That's above that's above our pay grade, at least mine.
Just tell Matt that question keeps coming up. I always give him a hard time.
Yeah, actually, it's so funny you bring up Matt Kennedy is someone who's been around on backup. I think he was one of like the first 10 employees.
Yeah.
I was on Twitter and I don't even follow Matt on Twitter. I probably should, but I was scrolling and I saw a picture of you two at Dreamforce and I was like, this is, I don't know, my mind.
Matt and I go way back. We met at Philly Force, and I always give him a hard time about like him coming down to DC and joining one of our group meetings and things like that. Because I know he runs the Jersey one with Gina. So
yeah. Well, I can see if I can drag him down here. He can sleep on my couch now.
There you go. Yeah, no, but Own Backup definitely is a great product and the company. So, if you guys are hiring, please let the team know as well, because that might be something good for our group to know
Definitely.
about.
Yeah, we absolutely are. So I can share that, and if anybody is looking for a job, I'll be happy to connect them with the right people internally, and that would be awesome.